Hey guys, Jan here, and welcome back to the Emporium of the Weird. Oliver Brackenberry from New Age Sword and Sorcery has once again asked me to do promotion for a new Kickstarter he's hosting. The Kickstarter is for his double-edged book, featuring two novellas from Bryn Hammond and DARIEL QUIOGUE. Now I had the chance to speak to both DARIEL and Bryn. The first half of the video will be my interview with DARIEL, and we'll be talking about his story, The Walls of Shira Yulin. The second part of the video, I'll be talking to Bryn Hammond and her short story, The Waste Flowers, a goatskin story. Bryn is camera shy, so I emailed her some questions I had about her story, hence in the second part, it will be me reading out my questions and then her answers. So yeah, that's basically how this is going to work. I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you in the end. Tell us a bit about yourself,
Great.
Dariel. Who are you? What do you do? And
Well, I'm a writer and a photographer. Those two things are just they've kind of ruled my life since I was in high school.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's also been my lifelong dream to get my fiction published. So even though I was writing magazine articles, I'd always been looking to, do stories, eventually novels.
Right.
And so here I am. I'm
Okay.
also a role-playing gamer.
Yeah.
I play RPGs, avid player of RPGs. So I might touch on that sometime during our questionnaire because, yeah, they do influence what I write and how I write.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. There was that one RPG I saw on your drive-through RPG. I remember the tagline. It was like sword, sorcery, dinosaurs, UFOs, and like 10-year-old me.
Oh, yeah.
He lighted it up a bit. So, what was that siren call that actually got you into S&S? What was that? What was that author book film that got you actually wanting to write this particular fiction?
Well, when I was 10 years old, it was around 1977. So my sister was boarding in Manila for her college, and she would bring me things from Manila whenever she came home because we were living in a town outside Manila back then, and it was usually books. And one weekend, she brought home a copy of the Sword of Conan. This is one of the Ace Conan anthologies, actually a pastiche anthology, and Edgar Rice Burroughs' A Fighting Man of Mars.
Okay.
So I got exposed to Conan and Barsoom in the same time, and that was also the same year that Star Wars came out. So, my brain got really, really wired into that kind of cinematic, visceral, high action, high concept fantasy. And I always wanted to do it. I always wanted to do stories like that. So, eventually here I am.
I just wanted to ask because obviously, especially in the walls of Shira Yu, I'm gonna butcher this, Shira Yulan. It's very much
Yulun.
Yulun. It's very much based
Yeah.
on Asian culture, Asian history, that type of stuff. So did that also, so did you start reading fiction and then you slowly started getting interested into history, or how did those elements start coming about?
Yeah, the history interest also started around the same time that I was telling you about, because very early on I got exposed to Herodotus' history, unabridged version, and also Homer's Odyssey and Iliad. And that really got me interested into great historical events. The sweep of history has always been something that appealed to me, impressed me, and made me think about how people change, how nations change, wars, stuff like that. So you will notice that my sword and sorcery is it tends to be of a somewhat larger scale than is usual for sword and sorcery.
Right. Yeah.
It often involves wars because my first exposure was Star Wars, the Iliad. These were about large scale conflicts, but it was also focusing very closely on a hero and what they did during those conflicts. So it's not a straight history. It's a chronicle of somebody who is impacted by history and is helping to make history.
Right.
And I guess that colored a lot what I do with my stories, with my fiction.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that is interesting because yeah, and one of the things that really impressed me, and I've also said this to Brian, is that it is a novella, and I think your novella clocks at around 107 pages, and a lot happens. I mean, I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but there's intrigue, there's sorcery, and there's obviously a
Hmm.
giant siege going around, and characters come and go. What absolutely impressed me with your writing is how you had all these high concepts that was condensed, and it didn't feel rushed, it didn't feel poorly
Oh, thank you.
paced at all. Was How did you plot these series of events out? I mean, it seems like quite a task, especially to fit in only 100 pages
It
or
was
so.
quite a challenge, yeah. And yeah, it was my first time to write a novella of this length. My previous novella was only half that length. So, but the thing is, I'm not a plotter. I'm a pantser.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to improvise a lot. I'm about 60% pantser, 40% plotter, or maybe closer to 70-30. But for the novella, I did try to buckle down and make myself more of an outline. And the first thing my mind did when I started finally drafting the manuscript was rebel against that outline and change it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think I was saved by the fact that my preparation for a story is quite intensive. My first stage in coming up with a story is always nailing all the premises that I want to use in the story, and that dictates my research. That I take down notes, and that starts spinning wheels in my head because I already have the character in my head. I think that's the most important. If I may, we can go back to the character
Yeah,
because
sure.
that's the wellspring from which everything comes, right?
Yeah,
Um,
Oron, is
when I
it?
was writing, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because when I was writing the first Orhan Timur story, The Lord of the Brass Coast, actually the character did not come first. It was the story premise that came first. Um, I was looking at the picture of the terracotta army in China, and I was thinking of having a story in which they came alive. And in trying to come up with who would oppose that supernatural army, I came up with the idea of a Central Asian, so someone who was like a Mongol or a Han, and that gave me the idea of okay, what if it's Genghis Khan? But Genghis Khan being already the Khan, the ruler of the entire Mongol nation, would not have made a suitable hero. So, what if instead of Genghis Khan as the ruler that he was, what if I had him deposed and turned into an
Yeah.
outlaw, a wanted fugitive, and he had an enemy, a perennial enemy, who was always after him. And that seed turned out to be so powerful that I've been able to spin 10 plus stories already. For Orhan, he came with several built-in hooks that make him so suitable for writing adventures. One of the first, of course, is that he'll do anything, absolutely anything, to get his revenge and to become the Kagan again, the Khan of Khans. And at the same time, in opposition to that, he's got this rough code of honor, um, and he will always torpedo his own ambitions to follow that code whenever that code opposes what he wants to do in the long term. So, like in Walls of Shira Yulun, he walks into a city under siege. In his own long term interest, he shouldn't do that, but because he made a promise, he does.
Yeah.
And there's always the fact that he's a hunted man with a constant enemy, Jungar, his former ally and blood brother, sworn brother. So that allows me to add a lot of tension to the stories. It's a continuing source of tension and subplots. So to go on to what I did with Walls of Shir Yulun, um, Oliver pitched the story to me. This is a commissioned story, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So he was pitching the idea to me of what if we did the siege story because he had just read Tim Wheelock's The Religion, and I was also telling him that I wanted to take Orhan into situations that were different for him. And so the idea came about of okay, here's Orhan Timur, the wanderer, the free ranging nomad. locked up in a city that's under siege. He can't get out. He dare not get out because he's got someone to save in that city. And so, boom, 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 all the ideas started spinning. And okay, for Orhan Timur, this to be trapped in a city under siege, most likely that would be somewhere on the fictional Mongolia China border, Central Asia China border. And so I started researching the province of Xinjiang, one of the westernmost provinces of China, or maybe I think the westernmost province of China. So it's very different from the rest of China that you might think of. If you think of China as bamboo and pine forests and big rivers, Xinjiang is very arid. It's like North Africa or the American Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a place where the cultures of Central Asia and China meet. And so it was a very, very much contested area during the wars with the Mongols. And so it became obvious to me that the city under siege would be there in that area, or rather its fictional version. And that when I started to research that, I started to research the geography and also the technology that would be used in those times. The 12th to the 13th centuries. So what were the siege engines used? They were quite different from what the Europeans would use. In some aspects, they were more advanced. The Chinese were more advanced. In some aspects, they were a bit behind. And then that also gave me the idea of structuring the story around the assaults made by the besiegers. That allowed me to actually work from a very loose outline, because I knew that each assault would have to be, in a way, worse than the last, to raise attention. Each assault would have to rely on a different technology to get through, because each time they would attack and fail, then that would prove that whatever they were using was not enough. So they had to try something else. And that gave me a lot of ideas without actually having to make a very, very detailed outline.
Right. I suppose that was one of the things that you had to figure out how to strike a balance of, I suppose, right? Like how much historical detail do you actually add, how much is actually needed. Was that also like a bit of a problem of figuring out how much of information you should be adding?
Yes, I had to actually cut down an idea that I had, because I had an idea for an assault from the river, but when I looked at it and how it was developing with all the threads that I was trying to weave in, there wasn't time for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I cut out that idea. I almost gave away a spoiler there.
Yeah.
That's why I had to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Also, yeah, you can't afford to reveal too much, right? Because you can't afford to have the pacing lag in a sword and sorcery story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So
Absolutely.
I tried to, yeah, just enough to get the reader have a vision of what's going on in his head as much as possible. I want the reader to have a movie playing in his head when they're reading my stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, try not to go overboard. That's always a delicate balance for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I have a tendency to over describe if I let go.
This was a commissioned story, right? Oliver gave you
Right.
a story to write from. How long did this story take you to actually write from, like, beginning to end? Like, how long of a process was it?
I could have finished it in 3 months, but I ended up taking closer to 6,
Mm-hmm.
because there were some interruptions along the way. I also had a challenge of tying together the romance elements with the rest of the story. And Oliver and I went back and forth on that until I finally found out how to do it, and ran it by him. He said, "Yeah, this looks good," and so that's what I went with, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't have much experience writing romance.
Right.
My characters really just spend more time just kicking ass rather than romancing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You obviously do other creative endeavors, right? You obviously are a photographer.
Mhm.
You have obviously made a lot of. You've also written a lot of RPG books and supplements and stuff like that. Do any of those also shape how you write? Like, for example, photography. How does
Very
that?
much, I think.
Mm-hmm.
for one, I am a visual person. Being a photographer, or rather, actually, that's what led me to photography. That appeal of being able to make my imagination come alive in a photograph that you can enjoy. And I also took a filmmaking course in college. So there are techniques of filmmaking that I use in my stories. Like, for example, you will notice that I often have reaction shots
Yeah.
where the viewpoint changes to show how other characters are reacting to what is happening. Uh, I believe I have a cinematic feel for intercutting between scenes and events. Um, and actually, I'd say there are a lot of influences in that. One was J.R.R. Tolkien. If you read his Battles of the Pelennor and the Battle of Helm's Deep, he was doing that. He was intercutting between different elements, different characters, and interweaving what they were doing into one coherent tale.
Mm.
And I thought that was very well done. So I hope that was one of my gold standards. And I was also able to dissect some exemplary films with the help of my professors back when I was in college,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, that study helped me a lot in breaking down my scenes, pacing, um, weaving things together. I always think of a story as weaving.
Mm.
Um, Also, one of the things that I have noticed about what I do, both in my photos, in videos when I have to do video, writing, even my other hobby, cooking, I love to improvise.
Mm-hmm.
I love the challenge of being given a situation and trying to come up with ways to exploit it, ways to make something different out of it. It's like a game for me. So like when I'm trying to do a photo, I try to think of, okay, what angle can I shoot this from? How do I light it? How do I twist this? And when it comes to a story, I tend to do the same things. Like what twists can I add? What embellishments can I add? What different thing can a character do? Or what different way can they go about achieving an objective? So yeah, that helps a lot.
Right.
And I think that the thing that ties it all together is uh, having fun with improvisation.
I think a lot of creatives, they want to be tied to a specific discipline, but actually it seems to be more beneficial when you have a lot of other hobbies, when you experience more stuff, because then in a way it all works together in tandem.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. Um, and also, when you are getting exhausted from doing one thing, the other creative pursuit can be your break.
Mm-hmm.
Like the best break from a long writing stretch is a trip to do photography. And the things that I see when I take such trips will inspire me to write when I come back.
Right.
So yeah, they feed it in each other in a cycle.
So obviously, one of the things I really did like about the Worlds of Shira, tongue twister, sorry, Shira Yulin
Yeah, right.
was Oren. But what I really liked about Oren is that he actually, there were many times where, like you said, even though a specific situation impacting his goals, he still did it anyway because he was tied to loyalty. He was tied to. I think there was. I don't want to say too much, but you know what I mean. I'm rambling, but
Yeah, I think that ties into what I wanted to say about Orhan in this piece, which is that yes, he does have this code of honor, and that it does color what he does a lot of the time. Even though he's actually quite ruthless when he comes up with strategies for battle, they can be quite ruthless. His tricks can be devastating to the enemy. Um, he doesn't mind body counts.
mm,
He's a guy who does not mind having a very high body count, and yet at the same time, he is a product of his upbringing. One of the things that Bryn revealed to me was just how much the Mongols are family people. So I guess that's kind of normal and ideal for nomads because when they're camping out in the wilderness and it's just your family, you better be able to rely on each other.
mm,
So there's that. That's why. Orhan Timur, for all his love for war, will stop to help a kid in trouble. I also wanted to play with the idea of, again, a Genghis Khan parallel, or a Genghis Khan mirror image, forced to confront the consequences of what he does. So Orhan, here's Orhan, the conqueror, or rather the ex-conqueror, forced to confront the misery of a people whose city is under siege, forced to deal with refugees who are being driven into the city by the raiders, by the enemy. So yeah, those things were in my head when I was writing.
The one thing I find, I obviously don't know that much about Genghis Khan, but he seems to be a very sort of mythical, almost, I'd say, an almost mythical figure at this point. It's hard to really know who the actual man was, and you essentially took that archetype of this, like, I would say, an idealized mythical conqueror, and you tried to make him more human. That's actually that's an awesome approach. To be pretty satisfying.
Yeah, exactly that. I wanted to make him more human. I wanted to show his more human side, which also played into having a romance angle in the story,
Yeah.
as challenging as that was.
So how long have you been writing these Oren stories for then? Because obviously you wrote him way before. How long have you had this character for?
Yeah, the first Orhan story was written in 2010, at the end of 2010, because I got it published first quarter of 2011. And then I wrote a string of Orhan stories through 2012 and 2013. I self-published a collection called Swords of the Four Winds, which also contains the adventures of three other characters. But the most number of stories were Orhan stories. I feel somehow that this is the character that is most dynamic, the most alive, the most connected to me somehow, even though I'm definitely not a Central Asian. But yeah, there's that. I really feel connected to this character. A lot of the stories, I feel he's just sitting behind my shoulder, drinking a beer, and then telling me his stories, his life stories. That's why they're not in order. Uh, they're kind of punchy. They're short. They're the kind of stories that you could tell in one night,
Right.
or less. And I paused for a while. I kind of got discouraged about the performance of my book, but now that's because I don't know how to promote. And also, 2013, my dad died. A best friend died. Then my sister-in-law died. So, 2013, 2014, up to about 2019 were very depressing years for me. I didn't get much creative work done. If I did any, it was because I was hired to do so. Started recovering in 2020s. Oliver got in touch with me, I think, sometime 2022, and he had been referred to me by the podcasters of the uh, Appendix N Club, and that led into his, I'm sorry, his commissioning a new Orhan story for the upcoming New Edge magazine, and well, that started a roll, and here I am again.
So yeah, I mean, it seems like overall, would you say overall your experience with working with Oliver and I'd assume you also worked with Bryn were pretty positive then? Would you say that this was a pretty positive experience writing for New Edge Sword and Sorcery?
Extremely positive, and I'm really looking forward to more work with both of them. I refer to Bryn as my step sister, yeah, as in the steps, because she's also so interested in Central Asian history and culture. And they've been great to work with. Very personable, very understanding. Uh, Oliver likes to make everything clear when he works, so that makes it very easy because communication is never a problem. And what I like is that he seems to be the kind of publisher who will really work to promote the writers and artists
Yeah.
who contribute to his publications. So I like that. I like that. I've been hearing about the other writers in the Nest Discord channel server who haven't had such good experiences with the bigger publishers.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate being with an indie with an indie outfit who will really take care of their writers. When my history research is not enough, I turn to Bryn for specific things on Mongol culture. Like for this one, my villain was a shaman, based on a Mongolian shaman, the Mongolian shamanistic traditions. And while I know a bit about that, I wanted to be more specific, so I asked Bryn, and she very helpfully forwarded some academic papers on that issue. And well, that really expanded my horizons. I must say,
Mm-hmm.
that gave me a lot of clues on how to write Kara Erke, the shaman in this book. Kara Erke, by the way, it's a real name in Mongolian. It means dark power.
Mm.
I like naming my characters with names that whose meaning I know, because it helps me tag what they are. Like
Ever?
Orhan Timur means iron.
Okay.
So because this guy has an iron will,
Mm-hmm.
so the name means something to me.
Right. That's
You see.
awesome. That's really cool. I mean, obviously, I'll be completely honest. I know nothing about Mongolian culture or specifically
Mhm.
ancient China. But was there anything as you were working on the villains and stuff like that? Were there anything that actually surprised you about ancient Mongolia? Something you didn't know?
Oh yeah. One of them was the belief that shamans could devour souls. Yes, they could eat souls.
Okay. Okay.
And but in fact, for you want to become a shaman, for a man to become a shaman, or a woman to become a shaman, their soul had to be devoured by some kind of spirit, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
sort of a merging between that man and the spirit.
Right.
That blew my mind. Okay, that's very interesting, and I tried to work a little bit of that into the story.
How does one devour a soul then? That sounds like some pretty heavy business there.
I know that. Yeah, well, the thing was the studies that I got, they were not very specific on how that happened. It's just something that happens usually in a sort of a dream or in a trance. Um, Shamans would often take drugs or spend the entire night drumming. I think that was another thing that made it in the story, that the shaman had to spend an entire night drumming to work his magic.
Yeah. Yeah, that did.
So things like that. They would
Mm-hmm.
send themselves into trance by those means. The sheer exhaustion and the rhythm would send their minds elsewhere. Just that myself, because some of my work as a photographer, we would document the a program that tried preserve and uh, to preserve and document the cultures of some indigenous peoples, tribes in the highlands of where I live, and they have similar shamanistic practices. So
Mm-hmm.
I got to witness such a ritual where uh, these bailan would dance and drum and chant until they enter the trance, and then they started speaking in voices. And that the ritual was sort of to predict whether something was favorable to the spirits or not. So that was very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. Is it what did they believe, were these spirits positive or negative, because it seems quite ambiguous, which I find very fascinating.
Yeah, ambiguous is the word. A
Mm-hmm.
spirit can be, um, for most spirits, good and evil are not a question,
Mm-hmm.
because the same spirit, when pleased, can be very benevolent, but when irritated, can be very destructive.
Right.
So the idea of shamanism is that these are our neighbors, and we should live with them in respect. But because we can't see them, because ordinary people cannot see them, um, then the shaman is needed to intercede when somebody crosses the boundary. Like for example, okay, this is funny. I found this common in both the Philippine and the Mongol beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a leak on a certain stone that happens to be inhabited by a spirit, prepare for trouble. And so the shaman is needed to tell you, okay, this is the spirit you offended, and this is what the spirit wants as compensation.
Right. Oh, man, that is so fascinating, eh? I said this to Oliver before, is that SNS really makes you, since it is mostly based on history, and since you guys obviously went out of your way to incorporate a lot of historical facts into your fiction, it kind of reinforces this fact that our world is fantastical. It is magical, and there's a lot of mystery to it still. I think people need that more than ever.
That's
I
right.
feel.
That's right. I really love delving into folklore to get material for my stories, and it's interesting because the complexity of it, the richness of it, how much it matters to the people who live there. Those are interesting angles to get into, and yeah, I really want to bring more of that into my stories.
Right. What are your plans for this character and for your series moving on?
Well, I have a timeline of all the Orhan stories. I made it for myself so that I could prevent myself from making continuity errors,
Right.
because I didn't want to set up something, a story, and then suddenly find out that that contradicted the previously published story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would like to refer you to my collection, Track of the Snow Leopard, where some of the stories there are actually set in Orhan's future, with regards to the events in Walls of Shira Yulun. I'm going to have him. I have had him find a love of his life. Further adventures will ensue from that. From they're trying to stay safe from Jungar, his rival. He will eventually have a son, and he will name the guy Orlok. And Orlok himself will also have adventures.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a plan. I don't have the specifics yet. At the same time, I already have some Oran stories that are written but not yet published, and some that are underway, works in progress. The one I'm working on right now, in fact, this will be the incentive for our backers. If we reach 250 backers, you will get a sort of prequel to Walls of Shira Yulun.
Mm-hmm.
It's titled The Shaman's Blood Price. And this story has Orhan and Jungar when they were young, sort of like an Anakin and Obi-Wan situation, when they were still brothers. And their first meeting with Kara Erke, the villain in Walls of Shira Yulun.
Right. Okay. No, absolutely. That sounds amazing. And the way how you describe it, the fact they have a timeline out, that does remind me of how Robert E. Howard, how he wrote a lot of his Conan stories. They were more like, I guess, like modern mythology, if you could call it like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
these were not stories written in chronological order. Rather, they were meant to emulate how stories of like Hercules or like Thor would have been told anyway, where it was like campfires and more allegorical, I guess. I really like that.
Yeah,
That has to be fun, I would assume.
yeah, absolutely. I've always thought of the stories as like that, stories told over a campfire, and I'm just translating them, I'm just recording them.
I've been asking this to pretty much a lot of people that I've talked to now. What advice would you give to like upcoming creatives, be it whatever, right? Be it writers, be it whoever, still have a lot of maybe doubt and a lot of maybe even anxiety over doing the
Mhm.
stuff that you're doing right now. Hey, what advice would you give them? I guess if you were to speak to your younger self, for example.
Oh yeah, that I would give that younger self a big talking to. Okay, uh, number one is that I know a lot of creatives are faced with imposter syndrome, and if you think I am in any way good or successful in what I do, um, I want people to know that I am also still a victim of imposter syndrome all the time, and you just have to stand up to that guy and whack him on the head and tell him to shut up because you've got work to do. I really recommend Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, which is entirely about this. And what he says is that every artist faces an interior foe, and that's doubt. And it will attack you in so many different ways. But what you have to do is, find the ways to stand up against it. What are the tactics that you can use to stand up against it? and it really means focusing on what you want to do, um, acquiring the skills that are required for confidence and delivering a good product. I think that's a big part of it. Writers should always think in terms of continuous self improvement. If you're already a good writer, you've already established a character, try to take that character in directions that you haven't gone before, or try to come up with new characters. Like for me, one of the projects that I embarked on last year was because I always tended to write dark stories. I said, can I write a comedy character? So I came up with an Arabian Nights inspired duo, Wali and Khalid.
Hmm.
There's the two stories have already been published. One in Heroic Fantasy Quarterly quite recently, and another in Raykel magazine. That was also published by a fellow member of the Discord of the Nest Discord, Nat Web. And Khalid is this handsome guy. I like to describe him as he's absolutely handsome, brave as a lion, swift as a falcon, thick as a city wall. But luckily, he's got Wali, who is unfortunately a monkey. So here's a guy who has been sorcerously transformed into a monkey. The problem is he's an old lecher, a former sorcerer, an old lecher, never up to any good. If you're familiar with the manga or anime, the idea for Wali, the monkey, was based on Disney's Abu from Aladdin
Okay.
and the personality of Rumiko Takahashi's Haposai, who is an old lecher. Okay, so there's that, and okay, let's see if I can write comedy that will work and that will make readers laugh. And apparently that worked. So yeah, I'm going to try even more stuff with either the same characters, or if it fits, or if I'm gonna do something crazy like Wali and Khalid, then I'll make new characters. Because I want to always keep expanding and growing.
Well, that's definitely on my reading list. Could you just repeat the title of that story again, or those two characters?
The first story, it's in Heroic Fantasy Quarterly, is called The Scepter of Aram Najar. The second story is Temple of the Ghost Tiger. This is in Raquel, #1. There was never a #2, so you won't have difficulty finding it,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Well, and before I let you go with the rest of the day, do you want to promote any social media, any other projects?
Yeah, my Instagram is FuguChrome400, and my blog is Swashbuckling Planets at WordPress.com. Yeah, I think you can tell from the name that I'm also very much into Sword and Planet of Barsoom style adventures. I am working on a role playing game called Swords of Maruzar. It's still a work in progress because I still need to play test it more thoroughly.
Hmm.
But it's got a pretty highly developed world already that's more reminiscent of Lee Brackett's Mars than of Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Interesting.
A
Okay.
more tragic, more troubled place. So there's that, and of course, please look out for new issues of New Edge Sword and Sorcery and our double-edged novella collections, because there will be more of them, and I'll probably have one or more hand stories in them.
Brilliant.
Oh, if I may add to the tips for writers,
Yeah, go on. Go right
um,
ahead.
this is something I always tell people when they want to write. It's to read very widely and to read outside their genre, especially for fantasy writers. Uh, it's very, very good to read outside the genre and also nonfiction, history, cultures, mythology, all the things that make up the roots of what we do.
Right.
Because nowadays there is so much fantasy that sometimes it's becoming self-referential. Like, for example, writers doing works based on popular role-playing games, but never look beyond those role-playing games.
Yeah, I agree.
So there is always a hollowness to such work. But when you read something that is well researched, that is well grounded, then you know it. You see the quality.
Hmm.
So there's that. So please, young writers, please read.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dario. I wish luck
Oh, thank you so much, Yannick.
Yeah. I wish you luck in your endeavors. The Walls of Shirayu was amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was brilliant, fast paced, reminiscent of Robert E. Howard, but it again there was enough of you in there that it didn't feel like a pastiche. It didn't feel like a run of the mill sword and sorcery story. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah, I guess my one last question I would want to ask is what would you recommend people to read if they do want to learn more about ancient China, because it is such a massive topic, right? And what sort of books or authors would you recommend that like talk about ancient Mongolia, ancient China, and that type of area of the world?
Oh, that is a huge subject matter.
Yeah.
But a good entry into it is Howard Lamb's March of the Barbarians,
Okay.
and then the later works that were spawned by that study. Um, Bryn has a nice scholarly. It's not a full book, but she has a nice scholarly work called Voices from the 12th Century Steppe, where she dives into how to read the secret history of the Mongols and what's in it. Basically, it's like a primer on that work because the secret history of the Mongols is probably the most important historical document on the Mongols because it's something they wrote themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And very importantly, they wrote about Genghis Khan before he became Genghis Khan.
Okay.
Because the most formative years, the most interesting years were when he was trying to unite all the steppe tribes into one powerful coalition. Because a lot of history starts with Genghis Khan as Genghis Khan,
Mm-hmm.
the guy who conquers part of China, part of Persia, etc., etc. But what was he before that? What made it all possible? And that's what Bryn likes to dive into.
All right. Well, absolutely. Thank you for the links. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think we'll call it a day. Thank you again for coming here on this call. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I really did appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks so much, Yannick. That was fun.
Yeah. Tell us briefly about yourself and what you have written thus far. Hi, I'm Bryn, living in Australia. I've only been writing sword and sorcery for a couple of years, drawn in by the whole New Edge magazine thing that started up. Oliver asked me for a story for the test issue 0 that was put out free in digital and cost in physical formats. Another story in issue 1, and now the novella in the double with DARIEL QUIOGUE. Until then, I was writing my Mongol historical fiction, Amgalant, that I self-published in 2 big books, or for those who like a less epic-sized novel, a 4-set. The 4-set still averages 100,000 words per book, though. As you can imagine, those kept me busy for a while, a fair few years. How did you get into sword and sorcery? And more importantly, how did you become such a scholar on ancient Mongolia and the Mystic East? Sword and sorcery first existed for me in the Fahad and the Grey Mauser tales, which my sister and I latched onto when young. After them, I was always in search for similar material. The 2 Amazon anthologies excited me with its focus on women. I've got to say, that was a welcome contrast with certain other barbarian books I found on the shelves and tried out, to my anguish and confusion at age 14 or whatever. I collected a few Conans, because I gravitated to the barbarians on the cover, but something prevented me diving too deeply into them when young. Possibly I can blame those other barbarian series, gore and horse clans, that scared me off the presentation of them. Although I was attracted at the same time. I've read more original Conan in the past couple of years. For about a decade though, I had pinned on my wall a page cut from a calendar, calligraphy of the famous quote that includes gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, and ends, "He trod the jeweled thrones of the earth under his sandaled feet." I won't say daily, but often when I saw it on my wall, I dug the ethos, the sandaled feet trampling civilization, and its rhythm is perfect poetry. I already liked poetry, so that enchanted me. Mongols? It's the research for my historical fiction. Probably the most valuable item I own is my step library, because I spared no expense on scholarly books that helped me write my own. A few years into that, I got a wake-up call when a PhD student in the area saw my bookshelves on Goodreads and my reviews and said, "Whoa, I've got a fair bit yet to read." It clicked then that, yeah, I'm probably pretty well researched by the standards of historical fiction. I'm a bit obsessive once I commit to a project. I throw myself in. Goatskin and her merchant band are the story's main characters. Now, at first glance, this is a peculiar choice for a sword and sorcery story, which normally sees mercenaries, thieves, or outlaw kings take center stage. Could you tell us your thought process behind this choice? I took Goatskin as my main hero because she's a nomad. But not even a horse nomad like those I was writing in my historicals. She's a goat nomad, which is a step lower as far as perceptions go. Besides, goats came to have a bit of a thing, a bit of a symbol, in Amgalant, and my mind was still running on goats as slightly weird animals in themselves. And it was at once obvious you can do a lot with goat imagery and the goat-like skills she has. The rest of my cast is merchants and bandits to start out with. I did want to give traveling merchants a more heroic image that they often get in sword and sorcery. My head's on the Silk Road, and the whole Mongol story, where far-traveled merchants play a vital part and have a lot more going for them than crude commerce. In that history, they aren't to be despised, and I didn't want to typecast them as, frankly, the cowardly, soft, greed-driven specimens you often see in S&S. I don't want to typecast anybody. Portrayal actually makes more sense now that you have framed it that way. The life Goatskin leads is extremely perilous, and requires a lot of courage, will, and skill to traverse harsh lands with bandits, hostile armies, grueling weather conditions, wild animals, or worse. Will we see more of Goatskin and her travels in the future? Yes, I'd like Goatskin to travel anywhere and everywhere the Mongols went, which gives me a huge scope, a wide canvas for where I can take her, what she can meet. Currently, she's among the Yak nomads in modern Amdo in her next novel that I'm in the first pages of. At the story's beginning, the merchants are attacked by undead creatures reanimated by flowers. It was a striking image. How did you come up with these monsters? I do like to contrast beauty and the gruesome, or rather tie them together. That was the point, or my driving force. And in that, I was heavily inspired by a couple of old favorites of mine that I reread ahead of this novella. Flowers of Evil by Baudelaire is all about seeing beauty in evil, in misery, in the outcast, and in the perverse. So is Jean Genet with his prison novel, Miracle of the Rose. I tied the corpses together with the flowers to chase that sense of perverse beauty, or seeing beauty in ugliness. Baudelaire has a poem of beautiful description of a pauper's corpse in a ditch. It worked as a physical expression of my themes in Waste Flowers. Your story is deeply rooted in history. But I wonder, was it fun to toy around with all these characters and throw fantastical and supernatural situations at them and see how they reacted? Yes, I love getting fantastical with them. I have historical people. I have Temujin Sworn's brother Jamukha, who's dead, executed by Temujin, Ghengis Khan, near the end of my Amgalant novels. But, because I'm writing sword and sorcery now, I can go and visit him in the dead world. I can bring dead Jamukha into the story. I enjoyed that, and no wonder, since he kind of took over my historicals. He's my favorite, and he has been the reader's favorite. Also, I got to bring steppe history alive in the shape of monsters. In my historicals, I've tried to invoke a mood of the storied steppe, steeped in romantic history, with its graved goods you stumble over in the landscape. Suddenly, I'm writing sword and sorcery, and those things can come alive. Yeah, I did notice how it really doesn't take that much tweaking in a historical piece to make it sword and sorcery. Since you're a fan of both, Would you agree that S&S cannot work without the grounding of history and human conflicts? I would hesitate to say that much, since I love the Vance type of more fantastical or even science fiction-esque settings. In fact, if Goatskin gives me the chance, the second kind of sword and sorcery I like to write is more along the lines of Vance's Dying Earth or Harrison's Veraconium. As yet I only have the name of my main, her outfit, mount, and signature weapon, and the vague mood of her world. But that's the essentials. I've loved science fiction as much as I love history, so I think those are the two types of sword and sorcery that call to me, either drawn from historical fiction or from sci-fi, and with those flavors. I asked this to Dariel, but how hard was it to pace this action-packed story in only 78 pages? For the first time in my life, I did an outline, a detailed outline chapter to chapter. That was to reassure myself I had enough story and not too much. It would have been a nightmare, I knew, without that proof that I've got about the right amount of material from the start of the drafting. Oh, that is interesting, and this was your first time plotting. Did you ever run into problems of cutting out scenes or whole sections of the story that would have made the story too long? I haven't too often had a set length, since I spend most of my time writing novels, which were as long as they needed to be. That's why with this one, being unpracticed, I had to outline with care for my publisher's exact word requirement. And the process worked. It went smoothly without cutting scenes. My first draft left a few hundred words up my sleeve for the last draft deployment where they'd do most good. I hate to cut material just for the sake of length. I'd rather have a bit of spare so I can expand a few places after I'm familiar with the whole. How was your experience writing with New Age Sword and Sorcery? Gorgeous. I had a gorgeous experience. Oliver makes himself available, whatever you might need of him. Also, he set up a private writer's room for Dariel and I and himself, where we discussed our plans, drew on each other's knowledge or skills, and I asked for help with problems. I so enjoyed that companionable experience of writing. I've been a very individualist, even isolationist type of writer in the past. It might seem strange to past me that I took this consultative process so readily and with enthusiasm. But comradeship helps in whatever situation, yes? Any words of wisdom or inspiration for up-and-coming writers? Don't listen to advice. No, seriously, don't let yourself be torn several ways by conflicting advice. Find your own path. Disbelieve most everything you read on the internet. This is me back in my individualist writing mode. But I look at the writing internet and think, I'd have been so confused if I'd faced this as a younger writer. I'd have been less lonely too, and much more informed, and yet, I can't regret the way I grew my writing. Follow your truth. When you have your sea legs, when you're confident on your own feet, that's the time to go out and join the bustle and jostle. I know this is a huge topic, but what books would you consider a good starting point for learning about ancient Mongolia? I like this question. There is a lot of popular history out there on the Mongols that is not so great. There's even more terrible stuff on the internet or in podcasts. Look for people who make it their specialty, who spend years on it. The others are going to have a superficial understanding. Don't be afraid of scholarly books, which often try to do outreach to general readers. Primary sources absolutely rule. They give you a feel for the culture, an up-close bodily experience that you simply won't get from a historian who chews that meat from you. The Secret History of the Mongols has a new accessible, affordable translation in Penguin Classics. The same translator, Christopher Atwood, has The Rise of the Mongols, 5 Chinese sources. These are always presented with introduction that orient you. For a batch of current historians whose works I vastly respect, let me name Michael Burren, George Lane, Michael Hope, Anne Broadridge, Bruno de Nocola, Maurice Rosabi, Paul de Buell, Roxanne Prasnia, anything by these people. One good book will lead you to others through its notes. You can do worse than Jack Weatherford. You can do a lot worse. Could you please share us your social media, and what other projects can we expect from you down the line? My website is amgalan.com, where I've blogged about the Mongols for years, and now updated people on my sword and sorcery. I chat daily in the New Age Sword and Sorcery Discord, and aside from that spend most of my time at Blue Sky. Down the line, I'm already discussing with Oliver Brackenberry plans for next year, Goatskin's second novella which I mentioned. That's what I'm concentrating on, so I do want this crowdfund for the first novella to succeed. Oliver has enticed us with talk of several novella lines after the first venture of this double. I'm excited to see them. Well, there you have it, folks. That's the end of the interview. The Kickstarter link and all the social medias of the authors will be linked in the pinned comments down below. And also, if you made this far to the video and have enjoyed it, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps me a lot. Till I pass across again, goodbye.